everybody in marketing and advertising needs to become climate literate, need to understand green claims, greenwashing, the challenges, the must-dos, the must-not-dos. And this is probably the other big imperative, which is that kind of degree of literacy now needs to be widespread in advertising and other service industries.
Welcome to Talking About Thinking the Unthinkable, our latest leadership conversation and podcast. I'm Nick Gowing, founder and director of the Thinking the Unthinkable project. The challenge for so many leaders in this disrupted world, in other words, people like you, is how to transform yourselves and colleagues in your organizations to act differently. Everyone needs to change what they do and how they do it, and they've got to do it very fast. So how to do it? That's a huge challenge where, remarkably, the advertising industry can lead. Why do I say that? Well, for this 18-minute podcast, I'm joined by Seb Munden. In his new book, Sustainable Advertising, here it is. Seb and colleague Matt Bourne have radical ideas for how the advertising business can drive a huge change in thinking and behaviour by all of us on sustainability. Seb worked at Unilever for 32 years, from brand manager for the detergent Persil. He rose to be Executive Vice President and General Manager for the UK and Ireland. Seb is now chair of both Ad Net Zero and WRAP, that's the Waste and Resources Action Programme, with its strong focus on creating sustainable packaging. Seb, welcome. Why do you say advertising needs a rallying cry for a vision? Advertising is not usually regarded as a base for broad action on climate change and sustainability.
Well, I think, Nick, there could be two surprises. For people working in the industry, I think advertising's facing, if you like, an existential threat, which is, that people, when we surveyed, 70 to 90%, depending on how you ask the question, say they want to work on something meaningful and purposeful. And, I think that puts a ticker on the kind of talent attractiveness of the industry if it doesn't change. And I think the other thing is for people who are not familiar with the industry, but perhaps are wringing their hands at the amount of citizen behavior change that needs to be accomplished. Actually, this could be one of those rare situations that what got us here could get us there. In other words, the framing and social norming influence that advertising has undoubtedly had could be put to very good use. So advertising could be the secret weapon of the people who are trying to create and drive a more sustainable economy and a more sustainable way of living. And the sustainability could be the shot in the arm that the advertising industry needs to secure its future and to secure a talent base who want to work in it.
You'll be familiar with what the skeptics will say, and they're saying that advertising is about maximizing revenue, not about saving the planet.
Well, I think that at its heart, advertising and marketing around it is about changing behavior and helping people make choices. And you can either put that to a commercial use exclusively, or you can put it to other purposes too. I mean, we learned in the pandemic, Nick, how well-crafted, simple messages could actually save lives. And so the power of framing and shaping behavior through advertising, I think, can be put to whatever use you want. And the question here is, let's put it to good use in service of accelerating a more sustainable economy.
Now, what you say in your book and what you say in your work is very clear from you and Matt. You say this is about creating a sense of urgency now to make what you call a big intervention. What is a big intervention in your view?
Well, a big intervention, I think, is that it's really about everybody involved in the advertising process coming to the realization that there won't be an advertising industry if it's not part of making a better future. and therefore, that kind of use of the sort of sense of imminent, not necessarily implosion, but big changes. I think legislation will start to prevent, the sectors that advertising can work in, and I think generally there's be a poor context around advertising if it doesn't change. But actually, for advertising companies, as in many businesses, they can future-proof the business by working with a different portfolio of clients, different products and services, and that will attract talent again, and that will create a completely different sort of advertising industry. That's the kind of change that we're talking about. In some ways, people and companies that have been making products have had to address supply chain emissions much earlier and much more comprehensively than service businesses, where essentially, if you think about it, travel, heating, and light has been the carbon emissions generator for most service industries. But I think we're going beyond that and saying, don't just think about your own emissions. Of course, that has to be sorted out too. And in the book, we talk about how to do that. But think about the way in which a more sustainable economy can be powered by advertising. And that could be a massive change and
Say,
create.
do you really mean there's an existential threat, and a lot of the next generation of those who might have been attracted into advertising so far will be turned away because they don't like the way it's going?
I think that's quite possible, yes. And in fact, we see it already. Interestingly, many agencies, new small startups, set up without the word advertising in their title. They're the same in any way but name. But what they've done is be much more thoughtful about the types of clients and businesses they want to work on.
Now, let's look at an example. For example, clothing. Tree loved clothes as opposed to second-hand clothes. What are you seeing in terms of the use of language, the way encouraging new framing is changing the perception? What are you seeing? Because you talk about how a couple of hundred companies have already come on board, realizing that this is an existential threat.
Yeah, so a good example would be um, the way in which ITV and Love Island had been become associated in many ways with fast fashion, and I think the people at ITV realised that this was something that needed to be changed, and they formed a partnership with eBay. And what we saw during that was two very big changes, really, which is the reframing of secondhand clothes to being more desirable in terms of expressing personality, uniqueness. And at the same time, we saw a huge upsurge in the amount of secondhand clothes being bought and sold on eBay platform. eBay's competitor, by the way, Vinted, have basically said, look, in the last couple of years, by 2025, the secondhand resale market for clothes or pre-loved clothes, that market in Europe will double to be worth about 34 billion euros. That's growing 11 times faster than the conventional retail fashion market. Now, of course, it's still relatively small. So I think what we can see here is that the power of reframing, and it's more than just language. It's advertising can bring visual imagery and social norming in a way that can only accelerate the desirability of pre-loved clothes. And what we can see as we go down the generational cohorts is that the percentage of spend going to pre-loved clothes does indeed go up the younger the cohort. So there could be here, with some concerted effort, a real tipping point imminently where these things change. Now, there are still, some issues with the amount of destinations available for secondhand garments, the collection of that. So there's lots of supply chain issues that need to be solved as well. And we wouldn't say that advertising and marketing is the only solution, but it's a significant contribution to the transformation of an industry as challenging as fashion.
Now, you've got a lot of hard-bitten people in the advertising business. They don't want to give up profit and surplus too easily. But what's been the reaction to this, particularly this idea that the advertising industry could be confronting a new tipping point?
I think the vanguard companies are starting to think about their portfolio of customers or clients and think about, how to um, increase the amount of clients who definitely are creating a more sustainable future, and how to move out of business which has a less sustainable future. I think you can see media owners thinking about that. You can see agencies thinking about that. So I think it's quite it started already.
What about where this is going now? Because I'm intrigued by one of the claims you make right at the beginning of your study. Marketing and advertising can help people make good choices to getting as close as possible to the imperatives of the Paris Agreement of 2015, from averting the most extreme predictions for climate and to sustainably regenerate the economy. That's a very, very dramatic and grand sort of claim of what is achievable.
Well, look, I think there are two components to that. The first is there's a very strong resemblance between, if you like, more sustainable business models, which is essentially creating more value with less stuff, and productivity, which is creating more value with the same amount of people and resources. So I do believe that there is a strong alignment between these two things. My experience at Unilever, by the way, was whenever we made supply chain decisions to do things differently for the right reasons, we invariably also ended up saving money too, because when you do create more value with less stuff, effectively it has that impact. So I think the first kind of act of leadership is to really understand that these things are not contrarian to each other, but can go hand in hand. That then takes you to the second kind of assumption in that statement, which is that behavior change can be accelerated by advertising. What we normally see is about swapping. It very rarely do we see case studies where advertising creates a completely new desire, as it were, but very often helps make choices or supports choices between different versions of the same thing. And I think one of the conclusions that we came to when doing the research for the book was it's not always the motivation that matters. If people buy a more sustainable product, it doesn't actually matter why. And advertising can provide a bunch of different reasons for more sustainable products to be preferred.
Now, Seb, we've got about 3 minutes left. What's blocking or getting in the way of achieving mass change led by advertising? What is it in the mindset that's really got to change here?
Well, in the end, for the advertising companies, it's about leadership. It's about saying, we're going to grow our business in a future-proof way, and we will succeed and get competitive advantage through advising clients and making advertising for clients that drives that. So that I think is one big thing. People who make stuff are already there. The media owners are already there because of the amount of digital media, really focuses the mind on the carbon footprint of digital. But now we really need the advertising agencies in the middle to see that this is actually future-proofing their business. It will potentially, at least at the beginning, bring competitive advantage and will help attract the best talent to come and join them in that effort, in the way that advertising has done in the past, attracted the brightest and the best.
Now, what about the strap line? Is this just about changing the strap line on a product, the kind of products you used to uh, sell at Unilever? Is it about just changing the strap line, or is it about making sure the product is much greener and therefore you've got a green product to promote?
It's absolutely the latter, Nick. And that's why I think everybody in marketing and advertising needs to become climate literate, need to understand green claims, greenwashing, the challenges, the must do's, the must not do's. And this is probably the other big imperative, which is that kind of degree of literacy now needs to be widespread in advertising and other service industries.
What about this idea that you've got as well of, I'm quoting here, a sustainable advertising manifesto? Sounds a bit heavyweight here, but what you call closing the think do gap to tackle inertia and complacency.
Yeah,
Your
but
words there.
I think a lot of people kind of want to do the right thing, and particularly in advertising, they want to come to work and make, the world a better place, do a better job, but don't always have the tools to do it. What we try to put in the book is, a manifesto, so the things that you need to bear in mind that you can take to your day job and put into practice every day, and make it extremely practical. And that's really what the book's all about. That sort of practical next step, the step that you can take right now.
Because you say at one point, citizens from every walk of life can now do their bit, and advertising should play a part in this.
That's right. And in fact, I think people have lots of ideas about, it may be difficult to sell sustainable products or more sustainable products to certain groups in society. In fact, our research shows that that may not be the case. There are ways to explain, ways to present, and all the research is there to show how to do that. And so actually, it's quite possible that many more sustainable products can be marketed and advertised, and they're not a niche in the slightest.
Finally, Seb, what would you say to maybe skeptics who are watching this, other leaders and so on, who's saying, what are they really on about? We can survive. We're doing well. Thank you very much indeed. Don't rock the boat in this way. In other words, this is going too far, particularly when you talk about an existential threat to the advertising.
Well, I don't think so because in the end, starting with public companies, the disclosures that are increasingly required by investment communities and by governments will ratchet up the pressure on companies that aren't contributing to a more sustainable future. So we definitely make the case that you may or may not choose to do this on moral grounds. You absolutely want to be part of it for business reasons.
And you say you've got support of a couple of hundred of what you call courageous companies and trade bodies. Does it need courage to do what you're proposing?
I think it always takes courage to change your strategy, to change the way a company expresses its values. That always takes courage. But actually, once you've decided to align those values and to take that step, it becomes a lot easier. And actually, doing the right thing makes huge business logic.
Well, Seb, I hope you've spurred anyone watching this to think differently, think radically, and think, actually, if we don't do this, then it'll be an existential threat. It's common across a lot of sectors at the moment. But Seb Munden, thanks so much. And you can reference every detail Seb gave us. A transcript is posted in parallel on our website, along with contact details for us and also Seb's work as well. Do please join us when we next have a conversation about thinking the unthinkable. From me, Nick Gowing, until next time, keep thinking unthinkables. More than ever, it's both possible and, as Seb has just said, it's necessary. Bye bye.